All right. So who would like to start? Who would like to be the first to offer up their project? You're gonna be invited to screen share, which I should make sure I have the option to do that. Who would like to be the first? Arnelia, Angelica, Malcolm, Brittany, Robert. I know Robert probably did not do it. Hello?
I guess I'll go.
Thank you. Can y'all remind me how to screen share?
You are sharing your screen.
Now I wanted to give people the option to. All right, found it though. All right, go ahead, Arnelia. Please share your screen. And then walk us through how you solved the assignment.
Wait, do you want to see the page first or the VS Code first?
The page first. Let's start there.
Okay.
Hey, good job. You got the whole assignment.
Yeah.
All right. Show us how you did it.
First, I put the CSS in because, what do you call it? This is the CSS. Can you hear me? Okay, good. All right. So yeah, I inserted the CSS under the link.
Can you show us your code while you're discussing it?
Yeah. This is the code I put in, the link.
I still see the website.
You cannot see this? What?
You gotta share your desktop. If you want to switch between desktop views.
Oh, okay. I don't know how to work this stuff. Okay, so here's the code. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I had put the style CSS page into the bird watching page. Is that how you say it?
Correct. That's the head of the HTML file.
Yeah, so I inserted a link for the style there. And then I started to add the wrapping so that it could start to change on the actual page. So I added a header, the navigation. I also put a main article, and then I put the pictures aside and also a footer. And that's basically it.
That's nice. Good job. Good job. You put all the pieces together. Do you want any explanations on any of the pieces? Did you learn anything new about HTML?
Yeah, I learned all that. I did not know any of those stuff.
What do you what their purposes were, or just that they existed?
Their purposes and anything, because I didn't know that if you put nav, that was for the actual navigation bar. So you actually had to be specific. Because even when I was helping, who was my partner?
Angelica, or maybe, or Nolan.
Nolan, yeah. So even when I was helping Nolan, he had put his main all the way down to the footer, and his page looked till it just messed it up. So it was important. It's important to actually put the actual pieces in the correct spot.
Super cool.
I guess I can go next. Yeah. All right, so by looking at analysis, I learned that I did not do it all the way right.
Oh, this looks good.
But this is what I got.
The coloring's I'm not sure if that's a little off. I don't remember what the demand was, but nah, this looks really good.
I did a lot of Googling, so my HTML is also not that neat because I just added a whole bunch of stuff. So I guess I overcoded. But this is what I got.
This is a lot. You put your style sheet in the code, but also it read it. That's interesting.
So what I did was I copy and pasted the original layout that they provided. And then I started styling, trying to like move things around.
Oh, you designed this?
Yeah.
That's even more impressive.
I tried the assignment, okay? So, I put style, and then individually I put each, I guess, area would be. So like each one, these are the CSS that I wanted to apply to them. And as following, then I created classes so they can be individually styled. I tried the footer. I put the div so it can kind of like stay permanently on there, but I don't know if it did that, but that's what Google told me it would do. And then I had the pictures. I used the side to move the pictures to the right side, and I had it to display a certain way and to move to the right. What else? I think that's about it.
All right.
Yeah, I learned that there's a lot of, things you can do with things.
Incredible.
But yeah, that's the end goal of it.
All right. We're going to do a little code review and discuss why Arnelia's answer is technically the correct answer. Even though your answer is very impressive and you actually went beyond and learned CSS and got your foot in that, which is great because that was going to be the next topic anyway. But so the design pattern that they generally want, keep sharing your screen though. We're going to go through your code. So the design pattern that we generally want is files to know the least amount of information as they possibly can to improve readability and to improve the performance of the code when we use bundlers, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to responsibility, there is a term called dry coding. I'm gonna Google the acronym real quick. Dry coding. What does that mean? The dry principle aimed at reducing repetition of software patterns, replacing it with abstractions, or using data normalization to avoid redundancy. The dry principle is stated as every piece of knowledge must have a single, unambiguous, authoritative representation within a system. That's a really, really, really complicated way to say, try and write everything once and make that responsibility limited to that one thing. So that's why they want the style sheet to be in a CSS file separate, and then you import it by pointing a link. That link that Arnelia had in her header had a reference to the style sheet, and anything that wants to use the style from that style sheet can now all reference that one style sheet. And that's how we essentially make code dry. Another thing that improves readability is indentation and how we format our code. So if you look at your code, let's go back to the code base. So you have great examples of indenting from 1 down to, even the style sheet is very well indented, except for like some slight alterations, like the LI versus the A. If the LI and the A are both under the H1 tag, to really show that relationship, the children of that A tag should also be on the same tab indent as the LI. But like having it a little bit back and then the UL back and the H1 back, as you see, like the visual code gives you these lines. I don't know, can I draw on this? Continue. Oh, oops. My bad. But yeah, if you see on your visual code, they give you these lines of indentation. I'll share my screen real quick. We're just gonna look at this thing here. So you see these lines of indentations. These lines kind of give you responsibility. You can even look at this, right? This is one large array, but I can easily navigate through this, right? This is one huge object underneath it. And then on the next level, here's this object for this thing, for this specific property, everything on the same level. This should not be here. Everything on the same level. And you can kind of see responsibility and relationships between your objects, your arrays, your data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So anywho, good job on y'all projects. Malcolm, you are next. Did you finish your project or did you start it at all? And then if you did, show us what you got. Doesn't have to be perfect. Whatever you got is good enough.
I started it, but I'll show you my code. It doesn't run right. Oh, wait, hold on.
That's no problem. We're here to learn. The way we're gonna learn is through us teaching each other. So I'm gonna review it. We're gonna discuss ways that it could be improved, along with what you learned from it.
I feel like
so explain to us what you did.
The last thing that you just described is probably the problem I'm having, indentation.
That is also true. I see you use inline styling. You pass the whole thing under Nav. I see style for some of them, LI Nav. I didn't even know Nav could be assigned styling. I know.
I found it in the style sheet.
So you copy and pasted the style sheet.
Well, I what's the word I'm looking for? I edited, but yeah, copy and pasted style sheet.
The style sheet they give you is already like booted with all the styling that the page needs. So that's why Arnelia's answer is technically the correct answer, because she has a link that references that in the head. All right, okay. So let's see your page. Let's see what this looks like when the code loads up. It's okay. It's okay, man. You're going to look back and see the progress. All right, so it literally prints out the style sheet in code. I wonder if that's because it doesn't recognize the HTML anymore and thinks this whole thing is HTML. because you did the correct thing when you did style equals, but I'm not sure if the string of style can be passed in through nav. I think nav is breaking your code. So all those navs should be styles if you want.
What's breaking his code is the fact that he named it bird page and not bird page HTML.
It seems to still be HTML page, but let's try it. Rename that.
Because that happened to me when I first started.
That's weird because VS Code seems to be giving it the HTML.
Plain text, she's right.
It was reading as plain text instead of HTML. All right, well, try it again.
And you can just hit, you can right click on the file instead of debugging it every time. And then just, it should say, let me see, it should reveal in File Explorer, correct?
Cool stuff, Angelica. You learned a lot.
And then double click it and it should open up.
I've never seen this. All right. See, this wasn't that bad. You just didn't get the pictures. I'm not sure why your pictures are breaking. Those are all navs. Oh, I think they're navs to the pictures. Oh, click on them. Let's see if they navigate to the picture. Where's it navigate to? Hey, click on it again. Favorite. Yeah, it is trying to navigate to the picture, but it's like it doesn't know. It doesn't know how to access it from this Chrome. It's not like you're hosting the picture up. It would be in the public folder, like your other pictures, if you wanted to do it.
I get what you're saying. I would have to put them in my public pictures for that to happen.
And you'd have to be using React as well. That's like a whole other process. Let's see. Can we look back at your code?
Yes, sir.
All right.
You want to go?
Let's see where you're getting those pictures.
Picture.
Let's see if we can make your pictures work. Is that
no, is that the dub? No, that's not it.
A simple dub logo. Photos. Gear, forum.
This should be it then, right?
I mean, you tell me. Color black, href J1, source favorite 1, favorite 2, small black bird. All right, what are these? What type of tags are these? Why are they A tags? So these should be image tags, correct? You're wrapping the A tag, a link around the image.
That's where I got the image.
Image is being pulled from where? Favorite 1, JPEG. Where's your assets folder? I could have sworn this thing. Let me open mine.
That's actually very good.
I'm pretty sure they came with the images in the assets folder. Coding course. Is this the same place? Did you like delete files?
I didn't save them to my source. I saved them to my they're just in my downloads.
I think you need to get the whole file. Like you should have took the whole folder all together, and all you had to do was change the HTML. It shouldn't have been changing a file structure at all.
Okay, so I don't even have to change this.
Yeah, nah, it was. They definitely came with the assets folder that pointed to all of the all the images, and the HTML that you had should have called. So they had. I'm about to show you. Let me show you mine, right? And this is not with any additions or changes. All right, so this is how your project started.
Right.
Minus the source file. This is from Robert's class. But this is the assets folder. And then you had underneath the assets folder, because the whole thing came in this assets folder together, you had index.html and style.css. So you had an A tag, href, this, it already had the image source to it. So the image should already be on the screen. So if I run this, I'm going to get an image. Run without debugging. So the image should already be working. So what's happening is you're somehow.
You're right. I agree, because when I ran it the first time, I did have images.
Yeah, so you're somehow breaking the images. I'm still suspicious of that nav tag, so I really want to look at this. Anchor properties, JavaScript, not JavaScript, HTML. Two more. Like, where did you see nav from?
I got it out the CSS.
Yeah, that's not a property on the anchor tag. So as I was saying before, you don't have to memorize these things, but you have to understand, deeply understand how they're formed, right? When we were looking at the HTML docs on MDN, all right. When it was giving us, not this one, intro. When we're doing this, we're talking about how this thing is structured, understanding how this is structured. If we have the tags over here, we have the content in between, that whole thing makes the element. Then we move forward, we understand nesting elements. Then we talked about attributes on elements. Attributes are not just made up attributes. We don't just attach them willy-nilly. They gotta be specific to that specific tag. Our job is not to memorize the tag and know all of its properties, because there's a whole bunch. There's anchors, there's head, there's nav, there's button. Like, there's a whole bunch of HTML elements. That's a lot to memorize. But our job is to recognize, hey, I'm using an anchor, right? Let me go and search up and make sure I understand what type of things can be used with an anchor. We have the MDN docs that we should be referencing whenever we're doing HTML work. This is well, not this specifically, but like, this is very thorough. This is very thorough. You can click any of these that you're using, and it'll literally explain it. So I really want us, when we're doing the homework, to be going through documentation and using that as like our guide at all times. Other than that, not bad. Interesting to see inline styling. As you know, you got to clean up your readability, so that way we can go through the code together better. But yeah, we'll have the opportunity to review this together on Saturday. We'll be doing office hours. So I'm gonna need y'all to give me group time when you and your group can come and meet together this Saturday. And then we'll go through the assignment together and I'll get it to the it needs to be. All right. I'm gonna assume all right. So now we can continue with the Udemy course. I could have sworn I just had that open. Nope. There we go. This is what happens when you hoard tabs.
By adding additional tags that do that break and that block coding style. Or you can do it within your HTML code by adding additional tags that do that break and that block coding style. And the really neat thing about images is, let's say you want to have a clickable image, all you would have to do is move that over between the href tags. And now when I refresh it, this image now is a hyperlink and it's linking out to Google.
All right, make sure y'all take your VS codes out, right? We're about to get back into building out our page and playing around with some more HTML. Not this. Hide floating meeting control panel. Cool. Let's go back to not the assignment, going back to our index.html file. So make sure, like, as we're building it out, you see we are structuring how we're building out the file. Make sure when you are copying code, you not only copy what is being written, but also the structure of the code being written. JavaScript is not as opinionated as other languages that are better suited at compiling code, but JavaScript also is, it does still have standards that it moves towards. And now we have tooling called TypeScript, which we will learn in the future, but not exactly now, that is extremely opinionated because people want you to have well-readable code so that way other people can look at your work and be able to understand what you did, and we can all share and figure out solutions together, because coding in itself is communication between humans and computers. So seeing how we give these structures in certain languages, it literally will not work based off of your indentation alone. And languages like JavaScript, not so bad, is pretty loose. And HTML also, HTML is pretty loose. CSS, it's pretty loose too as well. But like that's more so front-end development, fairly loose to be used, but there's most definitely standards that you got to stick by to make it more readable, make it easier for you to go back into it, make it easier for you to solve bugs and problems. So yeah, hopefully everyone now has their VS Code out. They have their terminal out. You don't have to say anything, but you can give me something in the chat, say like, yes. And that'll be good enough. And we can begin building out this page as well, continue to build out the page with CSS most likely.
Again, these are going to be very...
Let me see. Course content. We have... Yeah, we're going to add styling soon. So we're going to use the common tags, talk about divs and spans.
Very common. Hyperlinks are all over the place within web development, as well as images are really commonplace. So these two combined are going to be some of the most used tags within your HTML. In the previous lessons, we've talked about different block and different inline elements, such as the images were inline, the paragraphs and headings were blocks, which just basically means that it starts on a new line. So here we've got an example of if you wanted to set a default block element, we use div. And if we want to set a default inline element, we use span. And when we go over to refresh our page, we see what the difference here is, that the block ends here, so the div would start and end, and it starts on a new line automatically, as opposed to span, which actually doesn't start on a new line, but you can see that it does include the spacing between the different elements. And you can also use them within combinations here. So if we've got we can have a bunch of spans within those blocks.
All right, so let's mess around with this real quick.
See what the difference here is, that the block ends here, so the div would start and end, and it starts on a new line automatically, as opposed to span, which actually does.
All right, so let's try this, right? Let's add another comment and say divs. Oops, not that. And then add another comment and talk about spans. So divs are the building blocks of HTML, to be honest. Div element has no special meaning at all. It represents its children. It can be used with the class, lang, title attributes to mark up semantics common to a group or consecutive elements. So essentially, the div can be damn near anything you want it to be. People can style it into buttons. They can style it into tabs. They can style it into flippable cards on pages. A lot of the things that we interact with are generally divs on pages. They're a very powerful piece of code that we are now going to play with. I'm gonna do it one line so I could just copy and paste this actually. Go ahead.
And with my research trying to figure out when I was like doing the assignment, I came across that they were saying that divs were, they allowed you to remove the CSS that are automatically inputted into the text that we put in the HTML. So it gives you like a clean slate for them.
That's
whatever in there.
Some kind of torture chamber.
That can be very.
Spans are similar to divs, but not exactly as powerful. The span element doesn't mean anything on its own, but can be useful when used together with the global attributes, class, lang, or dir. Represents its children. Generic inline container for phrasing content, which does not inherently represent anything. It can be used to group elements for styling purposes or because they share attributes such as lang. It should be used only when no other semantic element is appropriate. Span is very much like a div, but div is a block level element, whereas span is an inline element. As they were explaining, you're gonna see span, hello span, hello span. And also I'm going to comment out this. Oops. I'm gonna comment out some of this stuff just so my page is a little cleaner. We can get to the stuff sooner. All right. How did it move again? Oh wait, I'm I'm tripping.
Doesn't start.
I forgot this is it. Let's see. All right. So inline elements all together. And then block level elements. Treat their area like their own little block. And we can even look at this further. So we have this thing here, div with the display block. This is the CSS. And the div naturally comes with this type of styling already implemented inside of it. Versus a span, you see no styling. And it defaults to being inline. Where's the P tag we had? P tags, look at their styling. They automatically have paragraph style, space it out. So yeah, understanding this allows us to manipulate these elements. Back to the class.
On a new line, but you can see that it does include the spacing between the different elements. And you can also use them within combinations here. So if we've got we can have a bunch of spans within those blocks or within those divs. You can see how that turns out within the coding, that it just shows up within there. And this is going to become really important when we start working with CSS, because we're going to see that these divs and these spans are going to be very commonly used to divide up different elements and create different elements within the HTML code, to break them up and to add additional styling and CSS to these different elements. Within HTML, we also have the ability to do formatting, and the formatting is inline. So now we've just added these strong tags around world. And what that's going to do is that's going to emphasize world. So you can also do EM, and then the closing EM. And I believe I could do that this way. So opening and closing EMs, and then here we've got strong. So when we refresh this page, we see what's happened here, that EM has made this italic look to the text, and strong has essentially bolded it out. So you also have the option to do bold, but more commonly, we're using strong, but bold is going to do essentially the same thing that strong does. So when we go back out and we refresh it, we see that they're both bolded there. It's important to be aware of these, but generally, again, depending on what your requirements are for the code, you might be using styling instead of adding in these different formatting.
All right, so let's just try them out. Strong, spin, oops. Oh, gotta stop doing that. Strong M, cool.
Elements within your HTML code. And again, you're always focusing on that readability factor, that you want your code to be readable. And when you do divide up the CSS, you take all of this out and divide it up within CSS, HTML, it's going to be a lot more readable code. But it is important to remember that these are there in case you do need to use them within your HTML documents. But Dreamweaver, and I believe Notepad has the drop down as well, where you can drop down and you can see all of this. Within your HTML document, you're also able to add this style attribute. Now, we had briefly looked at this earlier, and style, essentially what that is that's CSS. So it gives you the ability to align the content, and we literally have a whole ton of information here. So we can add a border, we can do solid border, we can do a color to it. And then we can just do a width of it as well. So we're just going to do and this gives us the ability to add in CSS right in line with our HTML code. So basically what we've done here around this div, we've created a border, a solid border. It's I guess a reddish border with 1 pixel in width. We can also change this pixel to make it wider. And when we refresh our page, we see that, in fact, indeed, our border has.
All right, let's see. Let's try it out. So I added border solid. I just said red instead of doing the hex code, I think, or F. I forget what the FFFF stands for. This hex. Yeah, hex code, color code. Then there's the RBGs, and then there's paints. Let's see. These are the hex codes. Essentially, if these have the same three thing here, if it's like repeating all across, you can just reduce it to the first three, and the code will understand, CSS styling will understand that these two are the same thing. So you might see this as a shorthand, that is a longhand. Similarly, there is where's the RBGs? Let me see. Oh, bless me. So you can also use RBGs by decimals as colors, and you can also just simply write the color. And they have a very expansive array of colors, as you can see: saddle brown, seashell, sea green, sienna. You can hear somebody really cared when they added these colors. All right. Let me know if you all are here where you see a red border around your div. If not, let me know so that we can talk through it and figure it out. Okay. I don't know if these are new messages in the chat. Nah, 7:48. I'm assuming we're all good, right?
Yes.
Thank you, Angelica.
You're welcome.
All right, we're gonna continue.
Has been added. And if you look here, it has a whole bunch of white space that's here. And this goes to what we were talking about earlier about these divs being blocks. And a block essentially takes up that whole space. So it doesn't allow that inline content to be pushed right next to it. So it has actually taken up all that space. And that's why this border goes all the way over to the right-hand side, effectively taking up all the space that's available on the web page. And there are literally a whole bunch of things that you can do with style. And if you want to add style to one of these inline elements, you can do something like style. So we looked at borders, and maybe here we want to do font size, and we want to make this font really big. So font size 18. And essentially, if you are familiar with CSS, this is CSS that we're doing here, but we're adding it inline within our elements, right within the HTML code. So again, style, and maybe we'll do a few more here. So the style options, and that's one of the good things about Dreamweaver, and I believe Notepad has the drop down as well, where you can drop down and you can see all of this, these options for the attributes. So this one, we're just going to do background. So we're going to set a background color for this one, and we're going to make it blue. So that's going to really stand out there. And also, we're going to add an additional one. So we're just going to do color, and color is just going to set the color of the text. So if that's blue, we want to make the text white.
Love when that happens.
And just like CSS, so the format and the coding is the same as it is within CSS, but we're just adding it inline here within that element within the HTML. So back when I go out here and I refresh it, you can see that this text is big. We've got that red border, and then here we've got that blue background with that white lettering.
All right, let's add that style. Style equals font size 20px. All right, cool. Let's continue.
And I just brought in that href, so a common one for hyperlinks is to do some styling. So when I refresh it, I can see here that by default, this is what our hyperlink looks like. So if I really want to change that, I don't like these underlines. Again, I can do it with style. I can do style equals text decoration. And here I'm just going to do none. And this is going to remove out that underline that we have by default within hyperlinks. And we see that there it just gets removed. So yeah, there's quite a bit you can do with style. And we're going to get more into that later on about the different coding, because essentially this is CSS. And some of these were more of the common used CSS that you find within HTML. So styling, again, gives you that ability to do that styling for different elements, specific elements within your HTML code. So another element that's commonly used within HTML are forms. You're going to see forms all over the place. Now, forms can get fairly complex, and we're going to try to run through as much as possible within this lesson. So here we've got basic form structure where we're opening a form, closing a form, and within the form, we've got our form content.
I'm going to pause it real quickly. Cool. No text decoration. Now we're going to add another section for forms. Form. The form elements represents a collection of form associated elements, some of which can represent editable values that can be submitted to a server for processing. That's a very technical explanation to say that this is a way for people to submit input data, information, text, numbers, whatever, to a backend service. Generally, it submits to some type of outside link. So it's usually gonna have a reference type, submit, form, action, method, get. So this is a method, calls a get. Anytime the submit button hits, the get is gonna run, and that's gonna send to whatever URL this is pointing to, and hit it with a get request. The backend server usually knows how to handle, or backend API usually knows how to handle get requests and will return back some type of data from the tables in the backend. All right, so let's play with this form here. So we're gonna write form, we're gonna give it a label. This should be like title. The label represents a caption in a user interface. The caption can be associated with a specific form control known as the label element's labeled control, either using the for attribute or by putting the form control inside the label element itself. All right, so the form attribute is gonna be, the for is gonna be referencing, I don't know if I should call this like ID or like, essentially like what is the reference for the backend API to understand this input data as. So like this input data is going to be for the username being the username attribute that's going to be sent back to the backend. I guess a good way to think about it is, best way I can think about it is like key and value pairs, right? Username is going to be the key for the data, and then whatever you type in, Sage X Sage, that's going to be the value. And the label is telling it that, hey, this label, which is going to be having the text of username, when it sends this information as a get request, pass in the input that you send as a value to the key of username. For this one is going to be for password. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if y'all have any questions. Feel free to interrupt. Label for username. Why did it do that? Or username. Username. And then put the input tag. So that way we can receive data. This is going to be inline. Type equals text. We're going to close it inline. Name equals username and value equals whatever is passed in. All right, can it explain these attributes? Oh, how did you get over there? All right. Nope. All right, let's look at the MDN reference. The input HTML element is used to create interactive controls for web-based forms in order to accept data from the user. It's literally just the input. Accepts user data and supports a wide variety of types of input data. Controls widgets are available depending on the device and user agent. The input element is one of the most powerful and complex in all of HTML due to the sheer number of combinations of input types and attributes, all the stuff that people can give it. And because of that, you generally also need validation. Validation checks what type of input is getting received and make sure that the input is valid for your database to receive. Also prevents hackers and poor, like a poor email or poor info or poor data from getting into your database and messing it up. Funny story about that real quick. There was somebody, there's like an internet joke about a kid's name that got inputted in the database and broke the database because it had no validation on the inputs. So yeah, validation is very important. So what are we looking for? I forgot. Oh, it's showing you all the input types. Now I want to see attributes. All right, so what attributes were we using again? We had value, all the initial value of the control. So this is the default value of the control. So if I change that and said enter username, you see we got enter username. But if I take that off, empty. All right, we got type equals text. That's how it knows which input type. As we were seeing, there's a whole bunch of them. Where was I? Here we go. As we see, the input types are all of these. You can turn an input into a button, checkbox, color, email, Super powerful tool right here for HTML. All right. So with that understood, back to the lesson.
So again, much like the
we're gonna finish out. The BR tag is just a break, a line break, one long line break. Ooh. I'm pretty sure you can do these and it won't complain. I personally prefer making sure that my closed elements look closed with a little indentation, but HTML also does not care. BR element represents a line break, just one big long line. Let's continue.
The other HTML tags that we had looked at, opening and closing, and whatever is in between is part of that form. So much like the body, the head, form, again, the same thing. So here we've got different items within the form, and we've got 3 different types of inputs here. So we've got input text, input type password, input type submit. And here we've got a name for it. And what we've done over here is, again, opening, closing, and that content of the label is there in the middle. And this label is being attached to username. So again, there's a bunch of attributes here within this input, and that's why we have to set a name here as well. You usually do have to set a name for the input because this is what gets used and read on the other side. So wherever you're submitting the form to, if you're submitting it to a constructor language like PHP or .NET, it's going to need to pick up this form information. And this name is going to be how it's going to identify this content. So username is going to be equal to this value. And when it does a get or a post request on username, it's going to return the value that was submitted. And this is only used by the constructor languages. And this is how everything gets tied together from one place, one form, and tied together with wherever the form ends up. And the way to set how and where the form ends up is to set it by action. So we're going to have an action. And then here we just set a URL. So submit me.php. So let's say that we had a file at submitme.php. So this would cause this form actually to submit to there. And then again, we do have some options here. So another common one is method. And we have those options of get and post. And besides get and post, we also have delete and put. So those aren't commonly used. Again, it depends on where you're submitting the form. If the server, if the backend can pick up a delete and put, or if it's looking for those, then you can use those. But commonly, you're just going to be using get and post. And the difference between get and post, so here we're just going to do a get, and we're going to refresh this. And here we're going to type in that information. And when we do the submission, we see that, okay, so we don't actually have a file here at submitme.php, but we can see how get gets handled. And we see that our username got passed, and that password actually got passed within the string.
All right, let's check it out. I need my submit button. What did that look like? Is there another input? Yeah, another input with the type equals submit. Right. Don't ask why that is that. Cool. All right, we saw submit me to PHP. We see is passing a query string, right? So once you see this question mark that signifies a query string to for the browser to send back to the database, to the API, which then calls the database, is going to pass it these values as key value pairs. This is a key username. This is a value Amos Kid, key password value Kool-Aid. And I'm pretty sure if we inspect the network tab, we can also see it there. Let's see. How did they send this request? Payload. Here's the payload. Query string parameters. Username Amos Kid 12. Password Kulu. And obviously we got nothing from our fake API.
.php. So let's say that we had a file at submitme.php. So this would cause this form actually to submit to there. And then again, we do have some options here. So another common one is method. And we have those options more secure. And it's going to pass the values. So here we're just going to do a get. And we're going to refresh this. And here we're going to type in that information. And when we do the submission, we see that, okay, so we don't actually have a file here at submitme.php, but we can see how get gets handled. And we see that our username got passed, and that password actually got passed within the string. And if you are passing a password, you might not want this type of format, because you see here that when we enter in the password, the characters get hidden, but when we do submit it, the characters are all visible. And this would be one of the cases where you would use post over get, because post is going to be more secure, and it's going to pass the value. It's not going to show the value. It's not going to cache that value, and it's going to show it only to the server that's receiving it. So it's going to be more secure than GET. And as well with POST, you can send more data. So with GET, you do get limited to the data. So when I go back out here, I refresh it, I can see that when I do post it, or when I do submit it, that button, that nothing gets passed within the request variables, and we'd have no information here at the top. So that's just got passed through the headers, and it doesn't actually show up within that URL. So that's how we get a little bit more security. Another common element used within forms is this text area. And as we can see, when we go out here, we get this text area. And we can set the size of the text area, and we're setting 5 and 20. And if we notice that this is going to be slightly different, because it's not going to be one of those self-closing tags that we do have our opening text area and our closing text area. And that's because the value in the content is placed between these text area tags. The common one is this drop-down format. So when we refresh it again, we get this drop-down where we can select 2, select 3, select 1. And this is just a default drop-down that we have.
I know we're going fast. I'm trying to grab some snack. Let's add some additional context. So text area. Got this nice little row of 5. Columns 20. That's fine. And then it's default text, content. These are the big text fields for inputs. Usually indicate for someone to write a paragraph or
tags.
Small essay.
The common one is this drop-down format.
So we got drop-down.
So when we refresh again, we get this drop-down where we can select 2, select 3, select 1. And this is just a default drop-down that we have. And besides the drop-down, we also have these buttons. So we've got radio buttons and checkboxes. So again, we're just doing type, and we're doing radio and type checkbox. And here we're just assigning the name. So important thing to remember about radio buttons is if you want them to function like this, where you can only select one of them, you keep the name the same. If you do give it different names, and you go back out here and refresh it, you're going to see that you're actually not able to uncheck off of them, and you're not able to.
All right, let's.
So important thing to remember about radio.
Let's catch up a little bit. So we got option. These are drop down buttons. And then we have the radio buttons. Select. Copy and paste this a few times. Two, select 3. Input type checkbox, name. I don't know why that keeps happening. All right, I'm gonna copy this. All right. And we're also gonna add the context that this is checkboxes. Should I say radio buttons? Radio buttons. Oh no, these are the checkboxes. Boxes. Let's make one of these radio button actually. Radio button. All right, let's see what our page looks like. We got check boxes, we got radio button, we got drop downs. I need to wrap my drop down because that is not correct. Oops. All right. Don't know why that happened. Select. All right, let's see what it looks like. Actually, I want this. I want this on its own page. Perfect. All right, let's go back. We got all this stuff. Sadly, they're all inline. That's really ugly. We could wrap them all in divs. I want this all in here. And then let's put the boxes in divs too. All right, let's see. Does that look better? No, it did not. It did not. Let me try the P's. There we go. Did I forget to refresh the last time? Let's see. Do the divs care? The divs do care. Okay, I forgot to refresh. Let's also throw this one in the div. I'm gonna just do this. And then I'm gonna indent them one more. All right, cool. All right. Ooh, there we go. More content. I drop down and then some check boxes.
Radio buttons is if you want them to function like this, where you can only select one of them, you keep the name the same. If you do give it different names, and you go back out here and refresh it, you're going to see that you're actually not able to uncheck off of them and you're not able to switch between them. So radio buttons are more of a selection type button as opposed to checkboxes, which you can actually check off both of them and then uncheck them. So that's the difference between radio and checkboxes. And again, when you're using radio, make sure that you are having the same name so that it does give that ability to flip through between the two of them. And we'll see that I changed this back to get so we can see that what we're passing through here. And once I enter in some content here, I can see that my radio button is HTML, my checkbox is one, check button 2 is CSS. So we can see that these are being passed individually and the radio is being passed as one selection for radio button. With the advent of HTML5, we got a whole bunch of new types of fields within our selector here. So we can select our colors here. We've got our date, time, and again, date and time. And I believe one of these is email. We also have this ability to do the slider. And when we look at our code here, so again, our first type, we're able to disable it. And the type is a number. So when we go over here, our first one, so I should actually take off that disabled and let's take off the class. And when I go back and refresh it, we should have the ability to type in a number. So right now I'm just trying to type in some letters, and it's not really giving me that ability. I guess it does let me do the ease because hexadecimal, but it doesn't let me do any other numbers. So, and I can see here that I do have these clickable ups and downs that increments for the numbers. And then here we just had our date. We had the next one was color, and then after that was email. So when we try to type in something here that's not an email and we submit it, we get this little pop-up that says we need to include an @ symbol. It's missing within this email. So when we do put that in, we should be able to submit it. Next, we've got a range, date, time, local, and then we've got month and a URL. So if we don't actually put an actual URL format here in the last one, type 8, we're going to see that we get the same type of error where we got email. So this has to be within a URL format. So when we do it like this, we should be pretty good right now in order to submit our data. And we can see that now we're passing a whole ton of information here. So again, these are new types from HTML5, and a lot of these should be available in the modern browsers. But again, you have to take heed into when you're applying these because they may not work as easily on older browsers. So that's something to always take note of and make sure that you do test these out. So this has been forms, and as you can see, there's a lot of options for forms.
All right, so everyone feels comfortable with forms?
Not really.
All right, let's discuss. So first, do you understand the concept of the form being used to send information to the backend API?
Yes.
All right. Do you understand that these inputs are ways for us to send data by giving a user the ability to interact with elements that they are most likely aware of using, things like drop downs, things like input fields, things like check boxes and radio buttons. We understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand that each of these have specific ways that they handle validation and controlling and sending content?
Uh,
All right, so I'll restate that. Do we understand that they have certain rules, guidelines behind the code for new browsers that tells it, hey, this thing here is a date object. This thing here needs to be a URL. And if it does not follow these rules and guidelines on how this thing is supposed to be used, do not validate that information to be sent back to the database.
yes.
All right, all right. Is it like the specific differences? What would you like to discuss then about forms? Any specific questions?
No. I got to know by you asking the question made me figure out what it is and put it together.
That sounds good. That sounds good.
I got a question actually.
Go ahead.
Can you like explain for dummies the check boxes versus the radio buttons? Like I know I see them and I understand how he did them, but I don't like know the difference of why you would use one versus another.
So yeah, let's look at our page, right? So did you create your own check boxes? I know I only made one. Try and make 2 for your page, and then we'll look through it, right? So
And I'm just following because I'm like new. It's like the first day doing all this, and I have to still figure out my my IDE and stuff, my VS Studio. I have it open, but like I don't want to like get caught up on doing it, so I'm kind of watching it and like absorbing everything. But
please try and just type it out. Coding is a lot of muscle memory. Like it's good to hear and understand, like conceptualize, but we gotta physically do to fully really grasp what we're doing here.
Should I do it like on Google Doc or should I use the actual VS Studio? Because I'm not I never use it yet.
That's fine. This is a lot of people's first time ever using it. We've only had 3 classes, and only in 2 of the classes, this being the second one, have we used VS Code. So you're literally in the second class.
Do I open a text file or just a new file in general?
Let's open a new file, and then you're gonna rename it into like index.html.
Okay.
So if you remember, do you know how to open your terminal?
Yeah, I think it was is a control backtick.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
All right. So what I want you to do is type out make dir. This is gonna make a directory, a folder. We're gonna call that directory code. So now you're gonna have a folder called code. We're gonna put all of our work inside this folder. We're gonna call touch. Touch is the command for creating a new file. So while make directory is a folder, this is gonna make a file. Code is what we want to put the file in, and then we're gonna call it index.html file. It's not gonna work for me because I already have one. Here's my index.html file. Already exists. So, oh, actually, it did work for me because I made a new directory. In that new directory, we've been learning about the HTML head versus the body. I'm not gonna really recreate all of that for you. The video of that class is up, so just take the time to go through that and like follow along and recreate these elements. But for now, feel free to type out the form. To be honest, you need all of this.
So I don't hold you guys up. Like I get all this.
Oh, no, you're not holding us up. I'm just letting you know. So during this time period, take the time out to I'm gonna leave this up while the video plays, but take the time out to go through this and watch it and recreate it. But let's look at the form, right? Refresh. Now we got 2 buttons. So these are the radio buttons. Radio buttons are for selecting one thing. I feel like if I add a label, it'll look better too. Label type equals checkbox. Let it know it's a label for the checkbox. And then we're gonna type out something. I'm gonna say chicken. And then I'm gonna say beef. So checkboxes you can choose multiple things for.
Okay, I'm getting it now. I have a better question, more detailed about the radio boxes then. He was saying if you like don't name them the same thing or something like that, that you can choose both and it would basically like mess it up.
Yes. So it knows the information based off the name attribute. So type attribute lets it knows what the type belongs to. These all belong to radio buttons. So that input, this input element and the label element understands that these should act as if they're radio buttons. The name of the radio button is this unique ID. It's your name. The same way your name is Omar. If I say, hey, that's Omar's backpack, that's Omar's shoes, this is Omar's whole element. So this is the name of the element. The backend API is going to read the name as its key when it sends it back to the database. So that's why it had this little object where I said everything is like a key value pair. The key being the identifier, the value being the value of the identifier. So we had label, we had the input with the name password, we had the input with the name username. So it's going to say key, username, whatever the value you pass along in is going to be what's sent to the database. In that similar fashion, names are identifiers. Since they're checkboxes, checkboxes need to have different names. So that way you can apply information to both of them. But if you try to send information to the database where it's like a radio button and you click on, you mess it up and you can click on both. You'll send the information like Actually, I can just show you the query string rather than. I hate that. I'm gonna name this broccoli, tomatoes. I gotta move the submit to. So the submit should always be at the end of your form. All right. So I broke the radio buttons. Now they cannot tell that the information only belongs to one. So when I click submit, we don't even see. Wait, why don't we see anything? I don't think that's not what's supposed to happen there. That's not what's supposed to happen. Where is all my content? Oh yeah, it's a post. That is supposed to happen. I forgot that we changed this to a post. Post is the more secure method. It hides the information. We can change it to a get so that way we can see this thing. All right, submit. So we're gonna get checkbox 1, that's the name, equals HTML2, checkbox 2 equals CSS, radio button 1 equals HTML, radio button without the 1 equals CSS. So that's going to send the database information back in that form where we have multiple keys for radio button. And normally, if we're structuring the database correctly, our database is going to look for only one radio button value because that's the purpose of a radio button. It should be grouping people's options so that way they can only choose one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I fully got it. Just the guy in the video, he didn't use the word like it was broken when he did it that way. So I thought that was like an okay to have it, like a okay way to have it where you can choose both radio buttons. I'm like, why would you want to do that? But I get that it's broken when you do that. You don't want to have that situation, basically.
Yeah, only because one, most people won't read it that way. If most people use checkboxes in the fashion of like, oh, I can choose as many as apply, versus radio buttons are like choose an option. You only get one. So there's the level of accessibility to people, trying to make it as intuitive as possible. Someone should just be able to look at something and be so familiar with this type of element. Like people are used to checkboxes on papers their whole life. They should be familiar to it behaving in the same fashion, if that makes sense. Though these are really Eurocentric rules on on how these things should behave. But yeah, once things become standard, things become standard. All right, let's continue. All right, HTML structuring.
With the advent of HTML5, we now have the ability to really break apart our structure of our HTML code. So within this ability, we have this ability to do sectioning. So one of the sections that we can do is article. And this helps us break out and section off a different code. So article can be used in a number of different ways to split up and represent different areas of your code. So within article, we can have a section, and we can have several sections within an article. And again, this all depends on how you want to structure your HTML code. So these don't actually provide any additional functionality, these tags. They're just more for breaking apart and having a more cleaner structure and a more readable structure within HTML. Within each one of these elements, we also have the ability to add headers and footers. So again, we've got these new HTML headers where we can add in a header over here. And we can also do headings within a foot, and we could do footers. So we could do a footer here as well. So just at the bottom. So again, this just makes it more readable for others that are coming in to use your code, to look at the code, and it makes it more readable. So all we're doing here, really, it's not really applying any kind of additional styling to it, and really there's not much else happening. They're essentially divs, and it's the same thing with any of the other tags, that it's just creating these different breakdown points of what we can use the code for. And we can see here that this heading actually got separated out. So if we do a heading and a footer within this section, we can see when we refresh it, they are taking up that whole line of code. So it is functioning the same way as a div would, where it is this kind of block code that's taking up that whole line. More commonly, again, you might see this navigation. So nav, it indicates that this is our navigation bar. And again, in itself, it's not really doing a whole lot, but it is helping us structure out and be able to better understand what each one of these sections or areas or code blocks is meant for.
So we got to see a lot of the things that Angelica and Arnelia use in their assignment. So essentially, it's a 2-week assignment. The first was just to get your hands digging into it and like really researching and finding out code for yourselves. This week, your responsibility is to finish it. If you have already finished it, you can go ahead and visit more of the guides and just keep going through some of the HTML guides real quick before we start moving on to JavaScript. Or if you want to move on to JavaScript, you're kind of bored of HTML, feel free to look at CSS. I'll drop a link for the CSS soon.
In this lesson, we're going to be bringing it all together, all of that HTML code that we've been going over, and we're going to talk about how to set up and structure a web template. So a template is going to be an HTML document that you can reuse over and over again in order to create multiple web pages. And
so Omar, we kind of went through this in the beginning after going through the HTML documentation. So you're going to see some stuff that we have written here, doc type HTML, this describing that this is the root of an HTML document. Then the head represents all that good old metadata that we're about to dig into now.
And so this is a default template that I'm going to be using. So up here, we've got our document type, we've got our HTML, and we've got our regular header tags. Here we are declaring what type of content to expect, the viewport, so that we're mobile optimized, and our initial scale is going to be 1, so that this content is viewable on mobile devices at the same scale as it is within a desktop view. And you'll find that if you do actually remove this, it's going to show up really small on your mobile device. So usually when I'm developing, especially with mobile being so popular these days, I'm always including this viewport. And then we've got our title. So here we can constantly update and change our title as we need when we create new web pages. And that sums it up for the head. And then we've got our body here. So here we've got our body content. And the way that I'm doing it is here, I've got a header. So I like to keep my header above my navigation. So when we look at the web page itself, I'm going to have my header up here, and this is going to be sitting above the navigation. And again, depending on how you're setting up your website, you might want to move the header below, or however you want to, however your design is, you might have to move some of these different elements around. And as I said, this is a template. So if I'm designing a website, I do want it to look the same across all the different pages. So I want to have the same structure where I have the title, I have some information about my site, and then I have my navigation here, my main navigation, then I have content, and then I have a footer area where I'm going to include.
All right, so we're going to add some of these to our page to make it look better. Oh no. Udemy, you're not doing too good there, buddy. Happens way too often. All right. Well, while that is fake loading, let's add some stuff to our body, right? First, we're gonna add the header. Now, why would it type that? Header, call this e-learning website. Let me fix this view for y'all. All right, so we have the header. Under the header, we also need to have Oh, this needs to be a H1 tag because this is our highest head element. I'm gonna add a H2 as well at the end of this. So as you can see, we have many H numbered elements, section heading. They have their own styling on it that makes it one larger, one smaller, as you will soon see. This is, I'm gonna make the second one. This is a sample website. That closes out the header. Now let's add the nav bar. It's going to be a list of elements with links. Href. And we're going to link it to the root of the page. And say home. See if we can link one to the image. Href. Assets. Dove. Test Dove. Let's see if it works or if it hits us like BJ's did. Href equals. And let's try one from the public folder. Favicon. All right. Let's refresh this again. All right. Well, our nav doesn't look as good as his. Let's see if these work though. Cool. All right. And then root. See all the files that's hidden in this thing. Oh man. Fun stuff. That was actually my root. Like not even the root of this document. That was my files. All right, let's see if this works now. Please do your job, Udemy. Welp, this is bad. That's fine though. They're doing HTML page structure, not that. HTML5 structure, HTML, bring it all together. We will see if one of these other ones work. Adding IDs to HTML elements. Let's see. We know how to add comments to an HTML page. We know how to add paragraph tags, create an HTML paragraph element, know that. We did list items, adding IDs to HTML elements. We can look at this one.
Within this lesson, we're going to talk about adding IDs to elements, to HTML elements. And IDs are useful for attaching CSS. And as we can see here within our HTML code, we've got class equals container. So if we want to actually add an ID into the paragraph, all we would have to do is do ID. And here we're just going to give it an ID of serious. And this gives us, again, that ability to connect to that particular element. And maybe we'll just put a background color there of red. So this gives us the ability to select out particular elements within the HTML code.
So we're adding style sheet to the head of the HTML file. The same way how we had the link rel equals style.css. I think for this one, it'd actually be like assets.style.css, since mine is underneath this assets folder. So those are the two ways that you can do it. You can either link to an outside style sheet, or you can literally add the style tag straight to the head. You can also add the style tag to the actual elements. But these are ways to import it across the whole entire page. Since we're trying to be dry, a lot of times we have repeating styles. If we have repeating styles, we can apply them across the page by using classes and using IDs. So we're going to see one called serious. We're going to turn background to red. And we're going to make this have an ID of serious. Then let's also add one for the class. We're going to have a class call goofing. And the background color, background is just going to be black. Let's do that. And then for the nav, let's find our nav. It's going to have class goofing. Stop kicking me out of the line. And what else are we going to give it? Let's put the header also all black. All right, let's look at this. Ooh, that text is hard to read. Let's say text color. It does not have text color here. Text. Did I not see text color? Let me see. Change text color. See. All right, let's see. Cool. This looks terrible, but that does work. I'd probably change. Let's try changing this. Class 7 nav. See what that does. Does it do anything? No, doesn't do anything. I want the specific words turn white, please. It might be the link that's forcing it, but I'm pretty sure the styling should overwrite from the CSS. There we go. It just has to reference directly to the link rather than the parent, though style sheets do inherit from their parents. All right. Let me know, everyone good on the headers, on the navigation, and understanding the style tag in the header, and not the header, in the head.
Yes.
All right, cool. All right.
And then we're just going to put some content.
Oh, one key note that I should mention. So class and ID are generally supposed to be reserved for styling. ID more so is for identification. That has to be a unique identifier. It should not be repeated. It's not specifically for styling. Class specifically should be reserved for styling. We try not to query elements by class and ID anymore. Instead, we try to query them by their roles. how they function on the page. We'll get into that deeper, but good to understand that if we're using class, try and use that specifically for styling elements, and using IDs for identifiers as well for styling elements, as well as other things. And keeping them unique, keeping IDs unique and classes for groups. All right.
In here. And also when we're connecting to various elements using JavaScript, we're going to be using the IDs as well. So I go back out here and I refresh it. We see that this particular element now has a red background because we've been able to identify it by using ID. And IDs are only going to be used once on the page. You wouldn't have multiple IDs. If you want to reuse a particular selector, you could use class, and with class, you can use that over and over again. Or if you want to select all the paragraph tags, you could do that as well. So you can't have the same ID. So this would have to have a different ID if you're using ID. And we'll just go back out here and refresh it and see the difference between the selected ID and the non-selected ID. And that's how you add IDs to your HTML. And you can add IDs to any one of these elements in order to identify it and be able to use it, CSS and JavaScript.
Okay. We're not gonna create ID, but we can check out the solution real quick. Oh, they're asking us. I thought it had the solution. We're not gonna add IDs. We put it here though, but let's see. All right, let's see what Malcolm was doing, adding inline.
To apply inline styling, you can add inline styling to any HTML element. So much like we were adding IDs, classes, and so on, we can add styling. Style is just another attribute we can add into our HTML elements. So for this paragraph, I'm actually going to add in a style, and I'm going to add in the same red background that we have. I'm going to remove it out from the CSS, and I'm just going to place it in as inline styling. And you're using the same syntax that you use for CSS to do this inline styling. So when we go out and we refresh the page, we're actually not going to see a difference because now this particular paragraph has an inline style of a background of red. And we can see that here when we look within our console that we've got background red, and that's the style that's being applied to it. And that's why the background is red. And we see that the DevTools, the Chrome DevTools indicate its element style. So that means that it's an inline style on that element. And that's the style that's being applied to it. So it's the same thing as placing style over here and identifying it via the ID. And you can put the same syntax as you use for CSS. So if we want to change the font color, we could do color. If we want to change font size, we can set a font size and so on. And we just have to separate out all of these different CSS values.
All right, that's fine. I think we understand the point of inline styling, especially since we have used it. Let's see. What is this?
When you want to add styling or script, JavaScript to your web page, you can do it on page using tags. So you can do these opening and closing style tags, and anything in between is going to be counted as CSS styling for the page. And as we had indicated in the previous example, so style sits in the head section of your HTML. You can also link out to an external style sheet, and that also is commonly done within the head section. And style will contain CSS styling. So we can remove this inline styling and we can move this back up here to style. So when we're accessing an ID, we just do the number sign and then we do the ID name and then do these curly brackets. And anything in between these curly brackets will apply that particular styling to that selected item within the CSS. That's how you add CSS to your page, and all you have to do open and close styling tags. So now when we go out to our web page, there shouldn't be any difference because we've just applied that same styling. And we see when we refresh it, we are applying that styling to the page. And within style, you can add additional selections as well. So if I wanted to select a container, classes are indicated with a period. And also I can select any particular element. So if I want to select all of the paragraphs and I want to maybe have font size 16 for any paragraph, and it's going to have some content outside of the paragraph. Outside paragraph. And now we can go back out and we can see how that style is being applied. And we see that The paragraphs get that certain size.
All right, so let's see what my paragraphs look like now. Absolutely no difference. Let me try maybe big difference. This is gonna be huge. Oh man, yeah, that's already too crazy. Let's do 12. That should still be pretty huge. All right, let's do like 4. All right, cool. All right. I should cover
to the HTML. I can see when I select that particular element, I've got a font size of 18. So if I shrink it back down to 16 or anything outside of the paragraph, we can see that that becomes the same size. So that's how we select and add style.
The 3 major key takeaways is what it is called number sign, I guess. Hashtag. Use the hashtag serious to represent element ID. Use the period for class, and you can reference HTML attributes directly by just saying what type of attribute they are, et cetera, et cetera. So normally we want to have our files looking much cleaner than this. As you can see, this is already getting to be an unwieldy file, and we don't even have really like that much on the page. Like we have a lot of stuff in this page, but we don't have really like that much on the page. And this is a lot to start to navigate through. We even took off the photos. If we added all this back in, it's definitely a lot to look at. With that said, you start to see the importance of separating responsibility, putting all the styles in its own folder or in its own file. That way you just don't have as much to navigate through and you're like, oh my God, I can't read this. Where's my images? Anyway, let's see how much time we have left. 7 minutes. All right. So the last thing I want us to do, because I'm pretty sure we're done with HTML. Congratulations. You all now know how to build a website in HTML. Y'all gonna finish your assignment. I want y'all to finish that. If you have finished it, there's a nice little CSS. CSS tutorial. There's a fun one. I gotta find the link to it. I'm gonna find the link to this really fun CSS website, and I'm gonna share in the document. And then if you finish your HTML assignment, head on over and try out the CSS website. For those on the YouTube, I'm gonna leave it in the description, so don't feel left out. All right, y'all. Next time we're gonna go through CSS. But yeah, good job. Any questions for me before we end this class?
I got a question about the assignment, the 2-week assignment with HTML. Where do I find that?
That is linked in the document. Due next Friday. That's the section y'all gotta check out. Okay. Review HTML tutorials, introduction to HTML. And which one is it? I believe it's this one, structuring a page content. All of this stuff. But if you look at the old video, the video that you need to review, you'll see all this and it'll walk you through how to start.
Perfect. Thanks.
No problem. All right. So again, I need y'all to give me your group information for when you can meet tomorrow. For Shaq and Abdul, I didn't even see y'all enter. Or Alex. Alex also didn't see you enter. Shaq and Abdul. Oh, what did you say, Angelica? I can also
Nothing, I'm sorry.
I'm also stop recording. Am I even sharing my screen still? Yes, I am. Okay, there we go. Let me stop recording too.